All right, it's a new hour on Fox Weather. You're watching Weather Command. I'm Stephen Morgan.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Marissa Torres. Thanks for hanging out with us. It is Wednesday, June 11th.
And we have an update for you. The 11 o'clock on the East Coast. New this hour, Colorado State University. They have just released their first update to their Atlantic hurricane seasonal forecast for this year. Back in April, on April 3rd, the first outlook was published. The numbers, as a reminder, 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 majors. Let's bring in Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross because he's got the new numbers, if they are new. It's been a quiet season so far in the Atlantic, Bryan. What are those numbers?
Yeah, they're 17, 9, and 4. So
no change.
Here they are. And no change because really the thinking hasn't changed. But, and I'll explain to you why this is in just a second, but there is more uncertainty than normal in these numbers because nothing is really pushing the season any which way. All these signals are very weak. When signals are weak, then if something is just teeter-tottering, it can tip over, you know. So we wouldn't be surprised to see this forecast be wrong. But let's compare the new numbers from the team at Colorado State University to the numbers that we have from NOAA, the average, and 2024. And what you see is that everybody is pretty much in line here. NOAA agrees in all these numbers. They give a range, but still, basically they agree. Now, when we compare it to average, we see that all these numbers are slightly above average if you take the midpoint of the NOAA numbers. And the reason it's slightly above average is because the Caribbean and the Gulf are unusually warm. Everything else is kind of in a neutral mode. But compare it to last year, the big difference to last year is the number of hurricanes. Because last year, the Atlantic, the tropical Atlantic, was super warm. The idea was that was going to be more energy to get systems going sooner. Then we would end up with more hurricanes, and we did last year. So this year, the Atlantic being a little cooler. All right, let's take a look at what's going on out there. The reason that nothing is going on now and nothing is really expected for the foreseeable future, at least a week, maybe even for the rest of June, wouldn't surprise me, is because high pressure out here is unusually strong. So high pressure is the opposite of a tropical system, which is low pressure. That means this high is dominating the Atlantic, and if you look at it closely, it's nosing over here into the Gulf. So that's what's keeping Florida so dry, and it's pushing everything to the west. As a matter of fact, when we kind of look at where the storm track is, it's very far south. It runs into South America, and then it heads up toward the western part of the Gulf and especially into the Pacific. So everything is essentially being shunted south and to the west, and that's what's keeping the Atlantic pretty much storm-free. We do have disturbances coming off of Africa, but they're running into all this dust in here, so they can't really get going at all, and then high pressure is holding them south as well. And notice the dust extends all the way through the Caribbean, and occasionally the dust has made it up into here in South Florida, also up to the Gulf Coast. Not so much right now, but the bottom line is it's keeping any tropical disturbances under control. Then the next thing is that the water out here is quite cool, only in the 70s. This is a complete flip from what we had last year, where this was all very warm out there. Remember, we got the early development with Beryl last year, so the water temperatures have cooled dramatically. And remember, that high pressure is strong up in here, so this flow around the high comes like this, pulling cool water down from the north and pushing it down in a more normal kind of way. It's actually a little cooler than normal, but the kind of normal kind of thing of keeping the eastern Atlantic cool this time of year, and then driving the warm water over this way. So we have all the warm water bottled up here in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. So there's where we're going to watch. If something's going to develop, it's going to be developing farther to the west here in the first part of the hurricane season. When we compare the current water temperatures to normal, a 30-year average, you see it's quite cool out in here. But there's another wrinkle to look at here. Notice how warm it is up to the north here in the subtropics. Well, when the water is warm, the air is rising. So a thought is that this warm water here, if this persists, and quite often it does persist once it gets going that warm this time of year, that's going to eventually weaken that high. When that high weakens, then the winds here calm down and this water warms. So a question for later in the hurricane season, are we going to be in a situation with a very warm, unusually warm eastern Atlantic, the opposite of what we have now? Sometimes we see that starting in July. So we're keeping that as a question, adding uncertainty to the forecast. Then we look at the Pacific. The Pacific is also in kind of a neutral mode out here. Remember, when we have this to be an El Nino, in other words, that box is very warm, that suppresses hurricanes. When it's cool, it supports hurricanes. So right now, it's slightly cool. The indications are if it's going to change from that, it's going to change toward cool. That would be La Nina. That would mean supporting more hurricanes in the Atlantic. So neither of those kind of supportive features are in place right now, but the indications are, and everything that we know, if it is going to change, it's going to go in that direction for the later part of the hurricane season. So the takeaways from the CSU forecast, indications are that the Atlantic will warm up. It'll definitely warm up. How much it warms up is a question. That if it does anything abnormal, it would be warmer than normal. Indications are La Nina could form, in other words, a more supportive environment later in the season. If it does change, that's what the computers are saying, but the signals are weak. So hard to detect, and that just adds more uncertainty to the forecast this go around. So anytime you have weak signals pushing one way or the other, guys, we end up with bigger question marks. But for right now, it looks like this is going to be at least much of June, if not all of June, is going to be tropical storm free in the Atlantic.
All right. Well, still, though, an above-average season, they're maintaining that position. Before we let you go, because it's always when we have Bryan, we got to figure out something else to ask. And so we've got the Eastern Pacific in focus because, I mean, you know, once the lights turned on for the season in the Eastern Pac, we've had storm after storm after storm. We're sitting here. It's June 11th. We're waiting on the fourth named storm already. Just broadly, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's one little pocket of extremely conducive conditions just off of Mexico. And if you notice, they keep forming in just that pocket. And as soon as they get out of that pocket, they die. So it's just this confluence of extremely warm water. And because we have that situation in the Atlantic where it's driving all the disturbances all the way to the Pacific, it's getting those tropical disturbances right in that conducive pocket. This will eventually break down as the whole system kind of breaks down and we change the regime. But that's why the Pacific, that one little pocket of the Pacific, is getting the systems right now.
It has been amazing to watch, right? Is it June 10th is when we typically have our first named storm out of the Eastern Pacific. We've already had our C named storm, which I don't know if you saw the update, Bryan. It is now a remnant low. Cosme is now a thing of the past. The advisories are done, and we now look forward to what transpires out of this latest area to watch. So we see.
Yeah, that'll be Dahlia, almost certainly. That's going to get a name as well. Yeah,
it's every outlook that has been issued. The tropical weather outlook with that zone has produced a named storm so far in the Eastern Pacific season, which is maybe 4 for 4. All right,
impressive.
We'll
see. Either way, all a great discussion to have as we continue to proceed into the hurricane season. Thank you. We have hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross with us. Always appreciate hanging out, Bryan.